Costco stock has soared a little bit higher on better than expected financials. We just got their financials a little while back, and Costco stock has moved higher. What to expect? First, Costco is one of my favorite stocks from a value investing standpoint. They continually add more and more, increasingly more revenue and, of course, earnings. Their margins are razor thin, but they're bigger than some of their competitors because they are just a machine, a cash machine on the one hand. On the other hand, it's overpriced. So this is a stock that, should you actually get in, you want to keep. But when can you get in is really the big question. This is a stock that will continue to perform. Costco stock continues to move higher and higher and higher. Now, we start with the economy. You can't look at Costco stock and say, well, their metrics are performing on fire, so therefore I'll just go ahead and pull the trigger. That's the wrong way to look at this. I always start with the economy. The Federal Reserve leaving interest rates higher for longer. This will have an effect on the overall economy. You'll see revenues decline in Costco, not because Costco can't perform, but because the consumer can't spend. The higher for longer mantra will bring unemployment levels to more normalized levels. We're at well beyond full employment. This will affect Costco. So should we see a broader stock market move lower because of this, which I'm anticipating one September, October, November, December, we won't see a stabilization until January, February, March, maybe April, May of next year, 2025. And that might be a good time to pull the trigger on Costco stock. That's one that you want to put in your bag and leave there for eternity. Costco stock performs continuously. You need an opportunity to get in, and when the economy is contracting and the market sells off, that's when you pull the trigger, but not when it's at all-time highs. Let's jump in and I'll show you the charts I'm looking at for Costco stock. Here's a look at Costco stock, the 4-hour bar chart. I guess it was, about 5 days ago, 6 days ago that we saw financials out of business days out of Costco stock. The stock market, broadly speaking, has been rallying. It had been selling a little bit. You can see the move lower there. That was both financials for Costco as well as the broader stock market. The stock market is basically kind of looking at things on two hands. They're sitting there saying interest rates are moving higher, will continue to remain higher for longer. The Federal Reserve can't make any kind of moves, won't do so until after the presidential election when they're certain inflation is in check. So anytime we get information, data points that says, okay, inflation isn't in check and the economy is slowing, the stock market sells. At the same time, the same stock market sitting there saying, well, if interest rates go lower, that means the economy expands, which is not true necessarily. We will expand at a slower pace. Not a recession, just a pace that's more moderate. And so these all-time highs, we may see a big check in the stock market, but then it might be a while before we hit these all-time highs once again. So the stock market is kind of looking at things in two different directions. We have non-farm payrolls coming out this week. Next week we get inflation and the Federal Reserve meeting again. They may say something. So this could push Costco stock much lower. Now back in April, Costco stock was trading at 700. It's at what, 825 now? These are big moves. That's nearly 20% in a short period of time. But that's broadly speaking the same thing that's happening with the stock market. Costco stock's just one of those stocks that performs very well. Here's a bigger look. This kind of goes back all the way to 2020, and I try to put these weekly charts together going back to a significant economic event, which of course COVID would be one of those. Costco stock was trading about 275 in 2020. It's now up to 825. These are massive moves, and it's representative of what's going on with the broader economy and the stock market in general. Sustainable? Sure. But we are at full employment, and the Federal Reserve is having to step in and contain price pressures, higher interest rates. This will have an effect across the board on all assets: gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, stock market, housing. we're all going to see a contraction in these if the Federal Reserve continues to leave rates higher for longer. Let's see how fast inflation comes downward. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. Assets under management, or total assets 67.9 billion, cash on hand 11.5, liabilities 46, for a total equity of 21. There are 443 million shares trading at 827 for 366 billion in market cap, 367. Less market capitalization and liabilities, less cash on hand gives you an enterprise value of 311. Price to earnings multiple 48.79. That's a bit high. The broader stock market is trading around 30. You can see price to sales, price to cash flow. Price to cash flow is 28.92. That's a pretty solid metric there. Price to book 16.03. Here is a broader look at price to earnings ratio. This is a bit rich. And I've said in the beginning, Costco stock is overpriced relative to alternative investments, especially when you consider what risks are out there with the economy. And looking at 48.74, this wouldn't be the time to buy. If you were a trader, stock trader, looking at short term, you'd probably look at that and say, that's 50% higher than what it should be. I'm hitting the button right now. Price to sales, they actually, relative when you're looking at retailers, they run a pretty good price to sales ratio, but it's a little rich at 1.38 right now. Price to cash flow 28.92, and then of course price to book 1603. Return on assets 10.65%, which is a little bit low, but Costco itself is one of these machines. They turn their inventory within 50 days. So if they get 30 days terms from their suppliers, they can turn the inventory 2 times before they even have to pay for it. So the return on assets is a metric that would you look at for Costco stock. This is one that's a variable you have to keep in mind, is that they turn their inventory so fast. When you compare Walmart, Amazon, and all these other players, they don't turn their inventory nearly as much. Return on equity and return on invested capital, 22.93%. I'll break these down. The return on assets is moving up slightly on for Costco, and this really has a lot more to do with economies of scale with Costco stock. And here's the thing: they have a certain number of stores. They're pushing more revenue through each of these stores, so your return on assets is improving. If the economy contracts, even all the way back to levels from Q3 2022, you'll see a depreciation if we see revenues moving downward. Return on equity 31.64, a little bit higher again, and then of course invested capital, a bigger number here, 22.93 versus some of the previous numbers. Quarterly revenue, fairly flatline. Q4, of course, is really the big print for them when it comes to the holiday season, of course. Projected revenues. This is where I spend a lot of my analysis. I look at the projected revenues, projected earnings per share. When I asked the question, what could possibly happen with any particular stock, I had to move these numbers upward. 254.6 for 2024. We just printed the first quarter there. 2025, 273. Both of these were pushed upward. These are consensus numbers for analysts. Gross margins, 12.55%. Here's your operating margins at 3.75%, which was an improvement, but that really boils down to economies of scale. You have this certain number of retail outlets that are pushing more revenue through each one, so your economies of scale improve because your operating costs remain the same even though revenues have moved higher. Net margins have improved as well. But you could see that it wouldn't take much to bring net margins down, say 0.2%, 0.2%, should we see numbers moving lower with revenues. Earnings per share, 378 for the quarter. Projected earnings per share, 2024, 16.15, 17.16 for 2025. I had to push both of these up as well. So analyst expectations are that Costco continues to perform. I don't believe they will continue to perform. This has nothing to do with Costco. It has everything to do with the economy. That's when you should be looking at this saying, first off, if you are a trader, you might be looking at it saying, you know what, we're kind of at the peak. And the Federal Reserve is making sure that that peak is contained. Not because there's an asset bubble, but because there's an inflation bubble. And although inflation is moving lower, we will see the economy contract somewhat to more moderate levels. So given that, I don't think we see the 2024 and 25 revenue projections nor earnings per share projections hit because the consumer is going to contract somewhat. For 2024 earnings per share projections, 17.14 is the next 4 quarters. We've already printed for 2024. You can see the yield is just over 2%. Your alternative, of course, is the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield, which is 4.35%. Basically, Costco stock has been pushed to its extremes with valuation. Will they continue to perform? The economy is going to contract somewhat. So Costco's still going to be printing money, just not as much as fast. And it has nothing to do with Costco's ability. It's the consumer. That would be a good time to get in if you were looking to buy Costco stock for a long-term value investment. In the meantime, I'm pushing a lot into Treasury yields. If you've been following me for any time, I keep saying this over and over again. My trade TLT stock, which is price versus the 20 and 30-year U.S. Treasury yields, it's been moving higher and higher. The stock market will move lower because of what the Federal Reserve has done. That to me is a less risky, sure thing for my investment strategy. And that's why when I look at these stocks with these valuations, a 2% yield when you can get the U.S. 10-year Treasury at 4.35%, it's kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm dumping into Treasuries knowing that the Federal Reserve eventually will have to lower rates, which means price on TLT moves higher. On a relative basis, I think Costco stock is way overpriced. Given an economic environment where it would be expanding after a contraction, Costco stock would be a solid value investment. Probably not today, though. Make sure to hit that like and follow button if you're looking for written content on this. I've got my Substack newsletter down below. Make sure to hit the link. We'll see you in the next video.